Daniel Harper thought he had found the love of his life in Lina Alvarez. But behind her charming smile hid a deadly secret that would turn his dream marriage into a nightmare of murder and betrayal. Daniel Harper had always been cautious with his heart. At 32, he had spent more time behind a computer screen than in social settings, building a stable career as a software engineer in Manchester. Love, he believed, was something that happened to other people, not someone like him. That changed the day he met Lina Alvarez on a dating website. Her profile picture showed a radiant smile, and her description spoke of ambition, adventure, and a longing for connection. There was something about her words that seemed genuine, something Daniel had been searching for without realizing it. Their online conversations quickly became the highlight of his days. She would send him long messages about her life in Colombia, sharing small, personal details that made him feel trusted and appreciated. Daniel, in return, spoke of his family, his childhood, and his dreams for the future. There was laughter in their exchanges, and slowly, Daniel felt the walls around his heart begin to crumble. After months of messaging and late-night calls, the connection felt real, tangible, almost inevitable. In 2016, Daniel made the decision to meet her in Bogotá. Seeing her in person for the first time was overwhelming. She was exactly as she appeared online, kind, charming, and affectionate. The days he spent there were filled with long walks, dinners, and the kind of effortless conversations that made time feel suspended. By the time he returned to England, he was certain he had found his soulmate. Within a year, they were married, and Daniel's friends and family were thrilled for him. Lina received her spouse visa, and soon she was moving to Manchester. Everyone thought this was the start of a beautiful life together, a story of love crossing borders. But beneath her polite smiles and careful words, Lina had her own plans, a plan that would turn Daniel's world upside down and set a deadly chain of events into motion. Once Lina arrived in Manchester, the early excitement of married life began to fade for Daniel. At first, everything seemed perfect. She was polite with his parents, eager to explore the city, and always smiling in the photos she posted. But it didn't take long for small cracks to appear. Lina spent most of her time on her phone, often texting or making calls late into the night. When Daniel tried to engage her in conversation, she would laugh it off, saying she was just catching up with friends from home. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Expensive purchases began to appear, designer handbags, jewelry, and clothes Daniel knew she couldn't afford on her own. She had an explanation for everything, always framing it as a reward for the sacrifices she had made to leave Colombia and start a new life with him. Daniel wanted to believe her, but a nagging sense of unease began to grow. Soon, her absences became longer. Nights out, with friends stretched into early mornings, and she would return home looking flustered or evasive. Daniel noticed she was increasingly secretive about her whereabouts, deleting messages from her phone and shutting it down whenever he walked into the room. The biggest shock came when Daniel discovered Lina had been in contact with another man, Marco, a Colombian living illegally in London. Their communications were hidden, but through careful observation, he realized their relationship was more than friendship. Lina had been plotting a future with Marco, one that did not include Daniel. Despite these warning signs, Daniel held on to hope, convincing himself that love would fix things. He didn't see that Lina's charm was part of a calculated plan. Her intentions were not to build a life with him, but to use him, to gain access to a visa and ultimately wealth, setting the stage for a dark and dangerous betrayal that he could never have imagined. Lina's growing obsession with money and freedom soon evolved into something far more sinister. She had realized that simply divorcing Daniel would not guarantee her permanent residency in the UK, and she needed a more final solution. Marco, the man she had been secretly communicating with, suggested a plan that chilled her at first but also tempted her with the promise of wealth and escape. The idea was simple in theory but horrifying in execution. Daniel would have to be removed permanently, and the act would need to look like a random crime. For weeks, Lina and Marco meticulously planned every detail. They studied Daniel's daily routines, noting the times he left for work and returned home. They explored ways to stage a robbery, to make it believable that someone had broken into the house with violent intentions. Lina knew her knowledge of the house and Daniel's habits would make the plan easier to execute, but the thought of actually harming him was something she pushed aside. rationalizing it with visions of the life she would gain. She also discovered Daniel had a sizable life insurance policy. The payout would provide the perfect financial cushion for her and Marco to start fresh anywhere in the world. Every late-night message to Marco outlined contingencies: what to do if Daniel fought back, how to avoid leaving fingerprints, and how to create a convincing scene that would delay any suspicion falling on them. Neighbors were subtly manipulated as well. Lina began telling them about strange noises in the house, creating a narrative of fear and vulnerability that would make a staged break-in appear more credible. The plan required patience, deception, and courage, but Lina was determined. Her desire for freedom and wealth had completely eclipsed any moral hesitation. By the time the fateful night arrived, Lina was no longer the loving wife Daniel thought he had married. She was a calculating conspirator, ready to transform a marriage built on trust into a deadly trap, where the line between love and betrayal had vanished entirely. The night of the murder began quietly, with rain tapping against the windows and a cold wind blowing through the streets of Manchester. Daniel returned home from work, exhausted but looking forward to a quiet evening with Lina. The house was dimly lit, the kind of calm that made a home feel safe and ordinary. He had no idea that outside, a deadly plan was set into motion. Lina had already coordinated with Marco and his accomplice, who waited nearby in a rented car, ready to execute their plot. Hours earlier, she had sent them precise instructions, describing Daniel's routine, the layout of the house, and even which doors were easiest to access. Every step had been calculated to minimize risk and ensure the crime would look like a random act of violence. When Daniel settled into the living room, he was unaware that the danger he felt least would come from the person he loved most. At some point during the night, the masked intruders entered. The struggle was brutal and brief. Daniel fought, but he was no match for the attackers who had prepared for every possible move. By the time the chaos subsided, Daniel lay lifeless on the floor, his body a shocking contrast to the quiet home around him. Minutes later, Lina called the police, her voice shaking with fear, claiming that two strangers had broken in and attacked her husband. When officers arrived, the scene appeared chaotic yet strangely staged. Drawers were open, jewelry scattered, but nothing of true value was missing. Something didn't sit right with the detectives. Lina's lack of visible injuries and the absence of forced entry immediately raised suspicions. Further investigation revealed deleted messages on her phone and a web of contacts connecting her to Marco. The careful planning that had made the night appear like a tragic burglary could not erase the trail of deception Lina had left behind. What had been a seemingly ordinary evening had transformed into a nightmare, the beginning of a shocking truth tale. The investigation into Daniel's death quickly revealed that the staged robbery was anything but random. Police combed through security footage from nearby streets, which showed no signs of intruders entering or leaving the house. Neighbors were questioned, and Lina's story began to unravel under careful scrutiny. Investigators discovered that the items supposedly stolen were mostly worthless, raising suspicions that the scene had been deliberately arranged. Then, a critical piece of evidence emerged. Credit card records showed purchases made using Daniel's cards shortly after his death. Tracing these transactions led police to Marco, who had attempted to use the money to fund his escape. Under intense questioning, he confessed everything. He revealed how Lina had orchestrated the attack, providing details of the plan and showing no hesitation in describing her role. It became clear that she had manipulated everyone around her, friends, neighbors, even Daniel himself, to create the illusion of innocence. Lina was arrested shortly after, found in her apartment hurriedly packing her bags to return to Colombia. She initially maintained that she had nothing to do with Daniel's death and that Marco had acted alone. But forensic evidence, messages between her and Marco, and internet searches for instructions on committing the perfect crime made her guilt undeniable. In court, Lina's calm demeanor shocked the jury. Her greed, cunning, and betrayal were laid bare for all to see. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, while Marco received 25 years for his direct role in the murder. Daniel's family struggled to comprehend how a marriage that began with love had ended in such horror. In the end, Lina achieved none of her dreams of freedom and wealth. The life she had meticulously plotted ended behind cold prison walls, a stark reminder that betrayal and greed can destroy lives in ways no one could foresee. Daniel's story became a chilling cautionary tale of trust, deception, and the deadly consequences of manipulation.